Why do I struggle with insecurity when I had a normal childhood? So I get this question a lot, and just to simplify things, I have found that there are typically two possible reasons for this. So first, normal doesn't always mean nurturing. So a lot of us grow up in homes that maybe looked stable. So there was no screaming, no divorce, no visible or extreme kind of trauma. But maybe our more subtler emotions were not welcome. Maybe vulnerability made people uncomfortable. Maybe we learned that our worth really came from being agreeable, high achieving, or easy to handle. So we might have become emotionally intelligent by necessity, not because someone showed us how to feel safe in our own skin, but because we were constantly scanning others for how to behave. So your nervous system is shaped by what it repeatedly experiences. So if your emotions were dismissed with a, oh, you're fine, or if love was offered in exchange for some kind of performance instead of presence, or if no one really mirrored back to you your inner world with some kind of language and warmth that felt inviting, then your system adapts by downplaying your needs or amplifying anxiety in order to get connection, right? This is that sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, reaching for, fighting for connection, or flying away until it's safe to come back. And that's how we wind up internalizing these love maps until we are rewriting them, right? And otherwise, we're on that kind of autopilot. So that's one possible reason. It's one possible reason. Maybe your childhood was normal, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was nurturing in the ways that you as an individual child needed. Now, there is a second possibility, and it's a little more nuanced. Let's say some people did grow up, or some people do grow up in securely attached homes. They had adequate emotional attunement, safety, and trust. But later, they encountered a relationship with someone that was deeply insecure, profoundly wounded. And slowly, without realizing it, they start questioning themselves. And that's because being around someone who is emotionally unavailable, emotionally unpredictable, emotionally hyper aware, anxious, or bullying, or even subtly controlling, that can rewire your internal compass in adulthood as well. So, insecure partners can tend to send mixed messages. Come close, but not too close. Be vulnerable, but don't need anything from me. Stop being so emotional, followed by, why are you such a cold fish? You should have known what I wanted, and if I have to tell you, it doesn't count. I'd love some help, but I don't trust you to do anything right. I'm sorry I was late, but the whole world doesn't revolve around you, right? So these kinds of mixed messages tend to create a double bind, and they mimic early emotional attachment trauma. They call these little t traumas. So maybe you are not a child anymore, but you might be naive enough to take on responsibility for what are truly your partner's issues in the way that an innocent child might, because you're well intentioned and because you just don't know any better. So now you start walking on eggshells. You edit yourself to avoid conflict. You feel anxious when they pull away and guilty if they come closer. And not because you're needy, but because their unpredictability is now training your nervous system to stay in a state of hypervigilance, in the same way that insecure children learned to adapt to unreliable parents. So secure adults can learn to adapt to emotionally unsafe partners because it becomes a survival strategy. So your sense of self-worth becomes entangled in someone else's fear of intimacy. Your trust in yourself becomes eroded by their inability to control their own emotions, or let's say self-regulate or co-regulate, mean inviting you in a healthy way into sharing their emotional experiences. So what happens is you wind up responding to a projection instead of really inhabiting who you are and showing up in that authentic way, because you wind up just responding to their wounded lens. You're responding to the wounded lens that they are now projecting onto you. You're taking it in as if by osmosis. So if you're someone who's wondering why you're suddenly spiraling in love, you might want to ask yourself, is this really mine? Or did I absorb this from someone who doesn't really know how to feel safe in love? Either way, whether it started in childhood or it was triggered later in life, your nervous system is adaptive. And that means it is changeable and it can heal. So you can restore that inner compass. You can return to the self that knew love without fear. And you can learn to rewrite those patterns that your body mistook for safety and choose a new kind of relationship with yourself and with other people. So, yes, maybe your childhood felt normal, right? But if you're here and you're wondering why your self-trust is eroded in love or in your relationship, then it might be time to start asking, what have I been adapting to that didn't really deserve the kind of power I gave it over me? I want to give you a few more questions along this line. So if you're struggling to sift and sort through this, here's a couple of other questions you can work through with your therapist or in your journal. Is this my shame or is it their failed expectations? And why do their expectations bring up my shame? Is this my guilt or their judgment? And why does their judgment bring up my guilt? Is this my fear or their insecurity? And why does their insecurity bring up my fear? Is this my anxiety or their helplessness? And why does their helplessness bring up my anxiety? Okay, so there's a few questions to help you sift and sort through that. I hope it helps. And again, if anyone can relate to or identify with either of these two possibilities, meaning that maybe it was a normal childhood, but it wasn't quite nurturing, or you feel like you did have a nurturing upbringing, but now in adulthood you've encountered a very insecure person that's starting to change the way you show up in relationships, let me know in the comments. Right? I'd love to know how this is resonating with you. Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week and I wouldn't want you to miss out.